Stephen King's stories have given us some of the most iconic horror films ever, but not every adaptation hits the mark. Some of his works, despite having all the right ingredients, just didn't translate well to the big screen. Here are a few Stephen King movie adaptations that could use a second chance with the right director and a fresh take. Needful Things follows the mysterious Mr. Gaunt as he sets up shop in a small Maine town, selling antiques with a dark twist. Each item comes with a deceptively cheap price and a request for a small favor. Before long, Gaunt's manipulations send the townsfolk spiraling into chaos. While the film's acting and conclusion were generally well received, it was criticized for simplifying the story. The novel delves deeper into the town's relationships and the malevolent forces at play, but the movie reduces this complexity, centering solely on Gaunt as the villain without much nuance.
I've been in this business a long time, and I've learned the pleasure of offering my customers what they really need.
He came here to destroy us.
Oh, you wussy.
There have been 2 murders and an attempted suicide in this quiet little town, and Mr. Leland Gaunt is at the bottom of it.
Stephen King is famous for his lengthy, detailed stories, but when he wrote the screenplay for Sleepwalkers, he had to work within some pretty tight constraints. The film clocks in at just 91 minutes, starting with a strong, intriguing premise. But as things progress, the plot takes a turn for the weird and confusing, eventually spiraling into a half-baked mess. The story revolves around 2 sleepwalkers, basically energy vampires, who need to feed on young virgins to survive. It had some real potential, and if it were remade today, King could definitely expand on the original narrative and fix that muddled ending to make it something special.
You cannot be in love with this girl, Charles.
You don't know me, Tanya.
But I want to.
Behind their smile is a secret.
Hi. Come in, Daddy. I have something for you.
I don't know who you are, but I know you're not who you say you are.
Behind the secret is a hunger.
Does it have to be her?
Dreamcatcher had a solid cast with Damian Lewis, Timothy Olyphant, Jason Lee, and Thomas Jane. The story centered around 4 friends with psychic abilities, diving into sci-fi horror territory with body-snatching aliens. But despite the big names and intriguing premise, the movie ended up flopping at the box office. Released over 20 years ago, the film had the right elements but lacked the execution. With today's tech and a fresh approach, a modern remake could easily outshine the original.
I've quarantined the entire area. Nothing leaves alive.
I'll tell you what you should be worried about. A hitchhiker. That's been our greatest fear. Somebody who could pass for one of us.
You're not Jonesy.
With all the right ingredients in place, the Mangler seemed poised to make a mark on the horror genre, especially given its source material from Stephen King. Directed by Tobe Hooper of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre fame and featuring Robert Englund, the man behind Freddy Krueger, it had all the makings of a horror classic. But despite its impressive horror credentials, the Mangler falls flat, offering a plot so hollow it's hard to take seriously. It's one of the lowest-rated Stephen King adaptations, failing to scare or engage its audience. Still, its bizarre monster and outlandish moments might just make it worth a watch as a horror comedy.
There was an accident today. The worst one I've ever seen.
Have you considered the possibility that the machine might be haunted?
That machine killed your daughter. We all have to make sacrifices.
Riding the Bullet started as a Stephen King novella before getting the film treatment in 2004. Despite a solid cast with David Arquette and Jonathan Jackson, the movie stumbles, jumping between dreams, the past, and the present without much clarity. The supernatural horror had potential, but the execution just didn't click. That said, this is one King story that most definitely deserves a do-over, one that could really capture the eerie twist it was meant to have. With a stronger script and a fresh creative approach, Riding the Bullet could finally get the adaptation it deserves.
Feeling all right?
Yeah.
You sure?
That didn't happen. Time for one of you to die. The choice is yours.
Thinner is one of those Stephen King adaptations that had the potential to be a sharp critique of greed and excess, but it never quite hits the mark. The story centers on Billy Halleck, Robert John Burke, a successful but morally bankrupt lawyer who's also struggling with obesity. After causing a fatal accident involving a Romani gypsy and dodging justice, he finds himself cursed by the victim's family, leading to a terrifyingly rapid weight loss. The problem? There's no one to root for. Every character is just as awful as the next. With the right approach, though, a remake could amp up the body horror and finally do justice to the story's dark potential.
Okay, somebody got to eat this pie, and soon. Everyone who eat pie die quick and bad. You got somebody?
Yes.
Yeah, you got somebody.
Graveyard Shift is one of those rare films that managed to score a dreaded 0% on Rotten Tomatoes, with even Stephen King expressing his disappointment. The 1990 flick follows a group of textile mill workers on the graveyard shift, where strange things start happening and colleagues mysteriously vanish. The film fumbles with a weak plot, cheap jump scares, and characters who are as flat as the script. Despite a creepy monster and a few attempts at misdirection, it just doesn't come together. With a better script and direction, this one could have been a decent horror movie, or at least avoided that embarrassing 0%.
You're not thinking about going down in there.
Just ain't no job worth this.
You can't put me down there. You can't put anybody down there. I know things.
Maximum Overdrive. In 1986, Stephen King decided to step behind the camera and direct one of his own stories, adapting a short tale from his Night Shift collection. When a comet passes Earth, it triggers all electronic devices to come alive and wreak havoc. The movie is filled with flaws and blunders, likely due to King's lack of directing experience, though it does offer a few laughs along the way. King originally aimed for a straight-up horror flick, so maybe now's the time for him to take another shot and redeem this nearly 40-year-old misfire. While the concept of machines turning against us is strong, it might be wise for King to hand over the director's chair if a remake ever happens.
And I finally decided if you want something done right, you ought to do it yourself.
Who was driving it?
I don't know.
Curtis! It's coming after us!
It was my first picture as a director, and you know something? I sort of enjoyed it.